Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale radio-controlled Armortek M4A4 Sherman tank. Since the last video update, the model's hull has been assembled and bolted together. We'll be going over more of the details in this video. A quick walk around the model. As with all Armortek models, the model's hull panels are all to scale thickness and are made out of aluminum plate. And also to assemble them, we need to go ahead and fasten the plates together via countersunk Allen screws. These countersunk Allen screws are pre-drilled and pre-countersunk into the Armortek plates and simply just bolt together with the supplied fasteners that they give you. Currently, the top deck that you see here is just mounted on for mock-up purposes only, and it's not permanently installed yet. It simply pops off the upper hull and is only being held in place by two small bolts, again, just for mock-up. Once the model progresses, the top will be permanently affixed to the lower hull via the proper fasteners required. And here goes the model's interior. So far, it is totally void of any type of machinery, but this will soon change as the build progresses. One thing as of note are the model's fasteners. As what was mentioned before, the whole model is assembled using these fasteners and fasteners only. No glues are used for mounting of the panels. It's important to note that on the fasteners, I modified the kit in that all of the fasteners have lock washers affixed to them. These lock washers are not included with the kit, and I like to add them to the fasteners to give them a stronger bond and keep them nice and tight and secure. In addition to the lock washers, another thing that I added to all the fasteners is a drop of Loctite and thread lock. The thread lock, along with the fasteners, will keep the bolts in their place for years to come. Along with the model, we'll now get to the model's transmission cover. Before I continue with the video, we're going to go back to when the transmission cover was still in pieces, and because some modifications were made to this component, which differs from the kit original. And here we have the transmission cover just before it gets fitted together and then mounted to the vehicle. As was mentioned in the unboxing video, the transmission itself is a 3-piece flange. This type of transmission is a derivative of one used on the M3 Lee. This was done so that you can get access to the transmission by simply unbolting it from the tank itself. This transmission setup was later replaced by an all single cast version of the transmission cover, and there are several different variations of those. For this one here, these started as the kit originals. Like I mentioned in the earlier video, they were all made out of CNC'd aluminum and have their flanges over here that are pre-drilled and are laser cut out of aluminum. To fit the flange to the actual housing itself, utilizes several countersunk Allen screws. Now, even though the screws are countersunk, the heads do protrude slightly past the flange here. And for this system to work properly, the pieces must be a nice tight fit. And if there's any gapping from the fasteners, it's going to throw off the alignment and it's not going to fit right with the upper hull and cause issues. To work around that, it's a simple fix. Once the fasteners are mounted to the transmission hub with a drop of Loctite, of course, you will then grind down the Allen screws to make them nice and flush. To do this, I used a simple bench grinder, and it simply just ground down the extra material until it's nice and flush. However, if a bench grinder is not part of your workshop, you can do the same procedure with a Dremel with a cutting stone. However, the Dremel with the cutting stone method is going to take longer to do and is going to put a lot of wear and tear on your Dremel, but you can still do the procedure nonetheless. And here goes the transmission fully assembled. The 3 pieces have been bolted on with the fasteners that were supplied with the kit. The holes all lined up and the installation went very smoothly. Some modifications were made to the transmission cover. These would include small details as well as an overall cast texture appearance. As from what was noticed in the earlier first unboxing video, the 3-piece transmission cover that's supplied with the kit is all made out of CNC'd aluminum components. The CNC tooling is very nicely done and is very nicely and crisply machined, but the issue is that on the real Sherman, these pieces were not smooth. They were actually casted and had a rough texture to them. To better get the realism on the model, I went ahead and added the cast texture via bodywork. In addition to the cast texture, what was also added to the model was the mounting blister that we see here on the side. On the Sherman tank family as well as the M3 tank family, the transmission would mount to the tank's hull via these 3 bolts up here, as well as the fasteners along the side. These 3 fasteners are always found on a large casted-in blister that is found integral on the casting. This blister here was missing on the kit, and so one was fabricated in its place out of plastic. After the piece was fastened to the transmission cover via the fasteners, it was then covered in bodywork to get the proper cast texture appearance and to blend everything in. Also, what was missing was the toe eyes. The 2 toe eyes that you see here are the versions that are found on the EastCoastArmory.com product line and are casted in resin. To affix them to the metal transmission mount, I went ahead and drilled a hole through the center of the resin casting and affixed it to the mount via fastener. The fastener secures the piece to the mount nice and securely, and there's no worry of it falling off in the future. Also, since the location where these pieces are located at, they don't really have much impact with any foreign objects, so the resin is a good choice and will not break as the model is driven. The last detail that was added to the transmission cover are the oil release valves, or fittings. On these 3-piece transmission covers, there are several little screws that would be removed to drain the transmission fluid from the cover itself. These drainage plugs are found in the following locations. We have one here on the side of the final drive mount, and another one here on the lower bottom portion of the final drive mount. This layout here is a mirror image on the reverse side, as we can see, and there's also one in the center of the center flange. These parts were missing on the Armortek kit and are simply fabricated out of a small Allen cap screw, which was drilled into the aluminum and then just simply screwed in. These parts here are now fitted permanently and will never have to worry about them falling out. Another modification that was made to the transmission casting itself is the modification of the way the angle here swoops upward. The casting did have an angle milled into the aluminum, however, it is not the correct angle and was a little shallow. To elevate it, I simply glued a piece of plastic to the top portion of the milled-in swoosh, and then redefined the swoosh with bodywork. After the bodywork was sculpted in, everything was then covered up with the smooth cast texture that you see here, leaving for a nice seamless appearance. Another addition that was made to the transmission cover was the addition of these 2 little divots, which are found here on the top portions here of the transmission cover. These divots here, I believe, are wrench clearance slits designed to get to the two top fasteners here. The divots themselves were added via the mill. I just put the flange mechanism when they were still separate into the mill vise, and I was able to mill away the divot to the depth and location that I desired. The divots themselves I've seen on several locations on the various real tanks that I've seen. Some have it on the corners like I have it. Others have it in the center only, and I've seen some that had it on all 3. This is most likely because of all the different foundries and pattern companies that were creating these parts under contract for the government. While we're on the side of the transmission cover, we will notice that the cast texture is emitted from this location here and this location over here. This is because these locations were left bare on purpose. This location here is designed for the final drive, which will be fitted like so. Because of the final drive's gears and all of the importance it has of alignment, the piece needs to be absolutely flush against the metal of the transmission cover. Because of that, no bodywork needs to be entering the final drive area. The problem with the bodywork is that it sticks up slightly over the model's transmission cover and could cause alignment issues. Because of that, you want to have the piece nice and smooth so you have the proper alignment. The way this was done was after the cast texture was added, I simply lined up the final drive to the mounting holes, outlined it with a pencil, and then once removed, I was able to sand away the part of the bodywork that entered past the pencil mark. Once the sanding was done with some sandpaper and was rubbed away, you now have the perfect shape necessary for the final drive, while the external part here of the cast texture retains its detailing. Similar feature was also done over here, where the transmission cover actually enters the tank side hull. Just like the transmission cover and the final drive, you don't want to have bodywork on this portion over here. Like I mentioned earlier, the 3-piece transmission cover that's found on the Sherman is actually a carryover from the M3 Lee. To illustrate this, I have here my 1/6 scale M3 Lee medium tank. And if you look at the transmission cover, you will see the similarities between the two. Matter of fact, the two share many of the same components. The flange mechanism in the center and the flange mechanism on the left-hand side are identical to the one on the Sherman and are interchangeable with the one on the Sherman. The parts that gets different is the flange mechanism for the right-hand side. If we notice, the Sherman version is totally flat on the top and has the same angle. This is because of the way the Sherman's front glacis plate is. It's one continuous plate. While on the M3 Lee, the angle is the same, but stops at the third flange here. This is because of the 75mm sponson gun has to have a small flat shelf. Because of that, the right corner transmission flange has to abruptly end and then flatten off to be able to be fitted to the flat shelf portion plate here of the M3 Lee. The cover is now ready for installation to the model. After the cover is installed to the model, the only thing left for the exterior appearance of the transmission cover will be the final drive, as well as casting and foundry numbers and letters that are going to be added to the various portions here of the 3-piece transmission cover. Once those marks are added, the exterior portion of the transmission cover will be complete. And here's the transmission cover mounted to the model. The transmission cover mounts to the model just like it does on the real Sherman tank, in that you have a strip of bolts along the leading edge of the glacis plate. There are also fasteners along the bottom portion here of the model's bottom belly plate, and you will also have fasteners along the two sides of the hull here. As for the rivet strip along the top, the model's front plate is actually very plain and is not very detailed. Armortek kind of simplified the hull in that the Sherman, the plate, is one solid plate that they used for the front, and then the two blisters get mounted to that. On the real Sherman, the front plate is actually comprised of 3 or 4 components, depending on the version that you're looking at. For an M4A4, the plate is actually subdivided in that you have a straight plate here, another straight plate here, and these two sections are actually cut in half. You have a plate that has the blisters already casted into the steel, and on this plate here will be flat with the M1919 machine gun mount already casted into the plate as well. This was simplified on later versions of the Sherman, namely on the late version of the Sherman, it was one single plate with only a casting for the 1919 that was a hole that was then plugged up with a metal cast metal machine gun well. But that's on the later versions of the Sherman. For this version here, we need to go ahead and start subdividing this plate. More importantly, it's the way the transmission mounts to the front plate, which will require a little bit of work. As you can see here, it's just a flat plate, and the bolts just simply mount to this plate, and there's no slitting or any type of detail present. On the real Sherman tank, this part here would actually be part of the transmission cover, and it was not part of the glacis plate. If you look at a real Sherman tank, there is a small little seam that runs along this section here where the plate mounts to the transmission cover. This is common on all the Armortek Shermans, and their M4A4 was a similar story. For this build, usually I would just etch the lines in with a Dremel and a cutting stone and carefully mark where the lines are, giving you the illusion that the two plates are separate. However, for this build, I am going to fabricate the missing section here out of plastic and simply overlap that on top of the plate, giving you a more realistic illusion that the transmission is separate from the glacis plate, as it should be. More information on this is to follow. To illustrate just how much longer the M4A4 long haul is to that of an M4A3 or any of the other type of standard hull Sherman variants, I stacked on top of the Armortek M4A4 a Plastic Panzer's 1/6 scale M4A3 E2 Jumbo. The M4A3 E2 Jumbo was nothing more than an up-armored M4A3. The two tanks used, the M4A3 and the Jumbo, used the exact same hulls. The only difference is that the Jumbo hull had extra armor fitted to the front and the sides, as well as a new transmission cover. However, the actual hull length dimensions were identical to that of the M4A3. The purpose of the longer hull on the M4A4 is because of the models, or of the vehicle's engine that was utilized. The M4A3 utilized a Ford GAA V8 engine, while the M4A4 used a Chrysler Multibank. The Chrysler Multibank was actually a radial engine that comprised of 6 other smaller engines that were all mounted and affixed to each other around a central spindle. Because of that, you had one very large, very overcomplicated radial engine. Because of the sheer size of this new engine, the whole hull of the Sherman had to be stretched out to better accommodate it. Because of the complexity of the multi-bank engine, the M4A4 wasn't exactly very popular with maintenance crews. Most of the M4A4s really didn't see much service with the U.S. Army, and most of them wound up as Lend-Lease vehicles being shipped to such countries as the United Kingdom, as well as to China. Many of the M4A4s that were used as Lend-Lease wound up in Israel, as well as other hotspots around the world after World War II. And that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek M4A4 Sherman tank. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as other 1/6 scale detail components. Thank you.